The house stood alone, a relic of a forgotten time. Perched precariously on the edge of a cliff, it loomed over a deep, dark ravine that seemed to swallow the light. The locals, wary and superstitious, claimed the house was alive, a sentient being that thrived on the despair of those who dared to approach. Yet for all their warnings, no one could truly know the truth of it until he arrived. He was a man worn thin by the burdens of the world, a recluse seeking solace in isolation. With little more than a few coins to his name, he purchased the house, dismissing the whispers as mere folklore. To him, the idea of curses was a figment of imagination, a concept for those too fearful to confront the unknown. He sought peace, a retreat from the chaos of life, but what he found instead was a descent into madness. The first night enveloped him in an eerie stillness, a silence that felt almost tangible. The air was thick, as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to unfold. He settled into a worn armchair by the fireplace, a book in hand, the flickering flames casting elongated shadows that danced across the walls. Yet those shadows, when glanced at from the corner of his eye, seemed to shift and writhe, teasing the edges of his perception. He dismissed it as fatigue, a trick of the mind. But then he heard it, a faint scratching, like the sound of claws scraping against wood. It was subtle at first, a whisper of noise that sent a chill down his spine. He froze, his heart pounding in his chest, listening intently. The sound ceased, only to return with greater urgency, echoing within the walls. He turned slowly, scanning the bare expanse of the room, only to find nothing amiss. The scratching grew louder, more insistent, as if something was trying to break free. Panic clawed at him, and he fled upstairs, clutching a lamp, determined to escape the unseen menace. Days turned into nights, and the scratching persisted, an ever-present reminder of his solitude. He tried to dismiss it, to convince himself that it was merely the house settling, but strange occurrences began to unravel his resolve. Objects shifted without explanation, doors creaked open and slammed shut, and he could hear footsteps echoing in empty rooms. It felt as though the house was alive, a sentient entity that thrived on his fear. One night, he awoke to a cold draught that sent shivers racing down his spine. The window stood ajar, an invitation to the night. He rose to close it, and that's when he saw them. Outside, bathed in the pale glow of the moon, stood figures, tall and emaciated, their limbs twisted and elongated. Their faces were devoid of features, blank slates that seemed to absorb the darkness around them. They stood still, watching, their presence a chilling reminder that he was not alone. He slammed the window shut, locking it tight, his hands trembling as he glanced back into the dark yard. But when he dared to look again, they had vanished. Yet he could feel their gaze lingering, a weight pressing down on him. The house began to shift in ways that defied logic. Rooms expanded and contracted, the air thickened, and shadows deepened into something sinister. One fateful day, he ventured into the cellar, a damp, cramped space that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. As he descended the stairs, the cellar transformed. It grew vast and cavernous, the walls stretching into an endless void. Bones littered the ground, remnants of those who had come before him. At the centre lay a pit, a gaping maw that seemed to draw him closer. The abyss whispered his name, a seductive call that resonated deep within him. He stumbled toward it, compelled by an unseen force, peering into the darkness that promised both knowledge and terror. What he saw made him recoil, a vast, shifting mass of something alive, writhing in the depths. Panic surged through him, and he fled, the cellar returning to its mundane form as he ascended the stairs. But the pit remained etched in his mind, a reminder of the horrors lurking beneath the surface. The visions intensified, each more grotesque than the last. He saw the house suspended in a void, surrounded by dying stars, the fabric of reality unraveling around it. Time lost all meaning, and he glimpsed the end of existence, the death of all things. The creatures were there, grotesque forms with pig-like faces and glowing eyes, crawling in the shadows, whispering secrets he could not comprehend. Yet he understood their intent. They wanted him, and they craved the house. One fateful night, they came for him. While scribbling in his journal, the scratching escalated into a cacophony, the walls groaning as if they were about to give way. He stood, heart racing, as cracks spiderwebbed across the surface, splintering wood and revealing the horrors within. The creatures surged forth, a tide of darkness, their eyes glinting with malice as they advanced toward him, their whispers rising to a fever pitch. In a blind panic, he ran, the house transforming into a labyrinth of confusion. Halls stretched into infinity, doors led to nowhere, and the creatures pursued him with relentless determination. He turned a corner, finding himself in an unfamiliar room, empty save for a solitary mirror. He approached, heart pounding, and gazed into its depths. What stared back was not his reflection, but a warped version of himself. Its eyes were black voids, its mouth twisted into a mocking grin. It reached out, and he stumbled back, horrified as it stepped from the glass, becoming real. The creatures closed in, their claws grazing his skin, dragging him down into the depths of despair. When he awoke, he found himself back in the cellar, the pit yawning before him, surrounded by the creatures that had haunted his every moment. They chanted in a language that twisted the air, their voices a haunting melody. He was thrown into the pit, falling into an abyss that defied comprehension. He landed in a realm beyond time and space where the house floated, alive and sentient. Its windows were eyes, its doors mouths that whispered secrets. The creatures crawled over it, their claws tearing into its flesh, and they revealed the truth. The house was a gateway, a bridge between worlds, and he was the key. Time lost all meaning in this place. The house sustained him, feeding on his fear, showing him visions of horror and despair. He witnessed the end of the universe and the birth of new monstrosities. He saw himself die in countless ways, each more horrific than the last. The creatures were ever present, their whispers a constant reminder of his fate. They told him he would never escape, that the house was now his home, a prison of his own making. Occasionally, he thought he heard other voices, distant and familiar, calling his name, but the house held him fast, refusing to release its grip. He wrote in his journal, the last bastion of his sanity. He chronicled the horrors, the creatures, the pit, hoping that someone would read his words and understand. But no one ever came. The house remained, perched on the cliff, a dark sentinel waiting for the next lost soul to claim. If you ever find it, heed the warnings. Do not approach. Do not listen to its whispers or peer into its shadows. For once you enter, you will never leave. The house is alive and it hungers for more.